one more time here.
Are we good to go? Okay, we'll just start all over again. Okay, today is Monday, May 17th, 2021. This is a committee of the whole meeting week, but before we go into our committee meeting, we will do our individual committee reports. Okay, first up, committee up is Streets, Sidewalks, and Lightings, and with Mr. Greer.
All right. All right, thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to bring to order Streets, Sidewalk, and Lighting Committee. Today is May 17th, 2021. It is 6:12 p.m. We're starting late due to technical issues, and we are virtual on GoToMeeting. All members of the committee are present, and other council members and guests noted in the virtual software. Topics of discussion. We have a couple pieces of legislation, requests for legislation. First request for legislation is a letter from Greg Tracy requesting legislation permitting the mayor to apply for federal resurfacing funds program by AMATs to improve Norton Avenue and 4th Street, and we are requesting emergency wording. In the letter from Greg Tracy, Mr. Tracy, he said that AMATs opened up another round of funding due to projects, a lot of projects coming under budget, so there was a lot more funds opened up. And so we are applying for an 80-20 grant through AMATs, and again, that's for Norton Avenue from Barber Road west to the city limits and 4th Street northwest to Westlake Avenue. And Mr. Tracy, could you elaborate a little bit more on this project?
Sure. So what happened here is AMATS gets about $15 million a year, a little more than that, of funding, federal funding to disperse throughout the Metropolitan Planning Organization area. And with all the estimates that have been coming in, all the projects have been coming in lower than the estimate. So there's been a buildup of funds, and these funds have an expiration date, like a lot of the funds out there. And if this money doesn't get used, it can expire. So what they've done is opened up another round of applications for submitting for grants to submit streets. So looking at the PCI scores and looking at with the number of projects we have moving forward up through 2024, we identified these two streets, Norton Avenue and 4th Street Northwest, as two streets that would be good candidates for these grant projects. The Norton Avenue project, approximately $570,000. The requested funds for the grant would be $444,000, and that would leave our portion to be about $126,000 out of a $570,000 project. 4th Street's a little bit smaller, it's a shorter project, but it has the lower PCI of the two. It is a $419,000 project that AMATS would be looking at covering $323,000 of that, and we'd be responsible for approximately $96,000 for that project. We were looking at these two areas as well, not only because of their conditions, but we're paving a section of Norton Avenue this year from Barber Road to Worcester Road North. Norton is looking at applying for funding for Norton Avenue in Norton as well, from the city limits to, I think, Cleveland Masson Road. So we were going to try to connect all that between Barber and the western city limits, and then also connect those roads through 4th Street to Westlake to downtown Lake Anna. That's pretty much the overview of all of those applications.
Awesome. Thanks for the explanation. Is what fund are we going to be using to pay for this?
Primarily, what I'm seeing right now is we're looking at trying to utilize mostly permissive funds, would be at least for the majority of it. Possibly some engineering may have to come from street capital, but most of the coverage of these we're going to try to take out of the permissive fund. They're both eligible permissive streets.
Well, that is all I have. Is there any questions from the committee members? I think I see everybody on the screen. Is there any questions from the council as a whole?
Yes, I have a question.
Go ahead, Mr. President.
Okay, Mr. Tracy, I thought Norton Avenue was already designated to receive a repaving down the road.
It is. So this year, Norton Avenue is scheduled for resurfacing from Barber Road to Worcester Road North to the Indian. So we were looking at applying for this to finish it off from Barber Road west towards the western city limits.
Okay.
The section where Alcoa is and Midwest Rubber Property, all that.
So you want to do the whole thing?
Yeah, and Norton is looking at applying for their end as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. DeBevick, you had your hand up?
Thank you, Chair. I just have a couple of quick questions. So the Norton Avenue project would be scheduled to take place then in 2022, so that would be next year.
Right.
So would we have to have our portion, the $126,036, out of 2021's permissive license tax? Do we have to put that in our infrastructure reserve fund before 2022, and then the same with 2023? Because I guess I'm just concerned. We've been receiving, I don't know city council as a whole, but I've been receiving tons of complaints about the streets. And I know it's awesome to leverage money, but I'm concerned that residents would like to see just some side streets paved. And by tying up $222,000 for projects that we aren't going to see come to fruition for 2 years, I'm just wondering what funds are going to be tied up. You said permissive license funds, but I'm not certain how much we collect each year in permissive license funds and how soon in advance we need to hold that back as our match.
So this falls, the Norton Avenue project would fall in the state fiscal year 2022, which is anywhere from July of this year through June of 2022. So although we would have to have the funds encumbered during the 2022 fiscal year, that could mean next year as well. For the first 6 months of next year.
Okay. Do we already have our permissive license funds spoken for 2021?
There are some things that were budgeted that are going to get delayed, I believe. So that's why when I say I think we use permissive for this, I've run a 5-year kind of computation of the funds, and it will work. And we can't use these permissive funds on any residential streets that have to be permissive streets. So it really won't take away from any of the other program, other than if I have to pull some funds for engineering. Engineering for these resurfacing roads, it may be $20,000 or $15,000 a piece each project. Plus, these are just resurfacing. There's nothing else that goes in with these, so it's a pretty simple engineering process.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Tracy, you mentioned that there would be some delays in programs. Were you referring to what? Could you elaborate on what possibly we might be expecting by possible
Just
delays?
there were some things budgeted for some of the OPWC matches and things that are not, one of them was for the Eastern Road between Van Buren and 619. That was kind of put on hold It was in the budget. There's 50,000 in there.
Mhm.
We're looking at doing some internal things down there as well. So there's some money that can be redesignated towards these projects. And there was some other funds that came out of there that came in under budget on some other projects that we will get, we should be receiving from the state from, I believe it was, I'm sorry, I misspoke. Those were taken out of street capital. The projects for this year, 2nd Street, Worcester Road North, and Norton Avenue, those all I just got the numbers today for the award on those. I can't say it yet exactly who it is because I haven't got from the state that they've actually executed the contract, but it came in well under budget, another $100,000 under budget. So there's also funds there that we're going to recoup.
Okay.
And that's the estimate. So the actual will hopefully come in even less than the estimate.
Okay, that's pretty typical that the actuals come in lower.
Yeah, unless you run into some serious unknowns.
Okay.
But since they're just resurfacing projects, that's likely not going to be an issue. If they were reconstruction projects with underground utility work, things like that, that's when you run into a lot of the change orders and things. I mean, it happens on resurfacing too, but it's a lot less likely.
Mr. Greer,
Yes, Ms. Colvin.
I have a question for Mr. Tracy about the co-part. When that's going in, aren't we getting some funding from them to help with street repair or building it up or whatever to make sure it's appropriate for them?
I haven't been involved with that since those talks, since those discussions started, but I have heard about that being a potential part of the deal with them coming along. But it would take some time for those funds to build up. So this would be a good way to let those funds build up and be used in the future when this road needed future maintenance or resurfacing down the line, I think.
Okay, thank you. I should have probably spoken to Mr. Hunt for that one, but your answer sounds pretty close to what he's going to say. Thank you.
All right. Is there any other questions from the body? Sorry, my screen is a little different, so I'm trying to see here. If there is no other questions, do I have a motion to call for this piece of legislation? Motion made by Mrs. Fry and seconded by Mrs. Angeloff. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Miss Angela, all right. Motion.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries. Next piece of legislation is a letter from Greg Tracy requesting legislation to enter into contract with Parent Asphalt and Concrete for the paving of the 2021 road program. Mr. Tracy, I reached out to him earlier just for clarification in some of the contracts. So I do have the contracts that they're requesting to enter into. My committee has them, but we will forward them to the rest of council today. Mr. Tracy also provided information, a cool little dashboard that explains the other bidders for these projects. These are, again, for the 2021 road program, and this is for the paving portion of the 2021 road program. This Parent Construction was chosen through an open bid process, or a sealed bid process. Let me have my notes here. And was recommended by GPD to conduct the paving portion of the 2021 road surfacing program. Is there any questions regarding this piece of legislation from the committee? Is there, Mr. Tracy, is there anything you would like to add to that?
I can, as far as the asphalt paving portion of the program, I can tell you that Now, we're very pleased that Perrin was the lowest and best bidder on this project. There are others around us that are slightly envious of us at this moment. So they've done a fantastic job. They have a good track record here. They do high quality work. So we're happy to have Perrin perform our resurfacing program this year.
So, thank you for the council and committee. Mr. Tracy provided an email that has it's a breakdown. Mr. Tracy's been calling it the program dashboard, which, by the way, Mr. Tracy, thank you. This is awesome. And spells out a lot of things. And this dashboard, just for this piece of legislation, just to add to it, there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7 construction companies that placed a sealed bid for this, and Perrin coming in at $698,000 for this project, which is significantly lower than the other construction companies. And that's open. You can check that out in that PDF dashboard that Mr. Tracy provided us. Bounce back over here. Is there any questions from the committee about this piece of legislation? Any questions, feedback from the body? And seeing none, do I have a motion to call for this piece of legislation? Motion made by Mrs. Angeloff and seconded by Mrs. Fry. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And motion carries. All right. The third piece of legislation today is a letter from Greg Tracy requesting legislation to enter into contract with Specialized Construction Incorporated for the chip and seal portion of the 2021 road resurfacing program. This follows suit with the last piece of legislation, and this again was a sealed bid process, was a public bid process. It was a sealed bid, and GPD recommended this company for the chip and seal portion of the 2021 road resurfacing program. Again, in the dashboard that Mr. Tracy provided, he also has three companies submitted a bid. And this one's a little bit more closer, but he breaks it down. The Specialized Construction comes in at $305,702, which is indeed the lowest for chip and seal. Do I have any questions or comment from the committee? Any questions or comments from the body?
I have a question, Mr. Greer,
Yes, Mr. Bevitt.
just in case residents ask. How does the chip and seal exactly paving?
1 second.
Oh,
Could you repeat that thing? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I said, I was just, in case anyone asks and this chart is out to the residents, how does chip and seal work? Those roads won't actually be paved then, correct? They'll just be like tar that fills the cracks? I don't know.
Yeah. So I will defer to Mr. Tracy on this. I have my explanation, but I'm sure it's probably off from the official one. So, Mr. Tracy, can you provide that?
Yeah, so chip and seal is just another type of resurfacing. It uses a lot of the same materials that are used in hot mix asphalt. They're just applied in a different way. So what we bid out wasn't just a single chip and seal that you'll find a lot of places do. We bid out a double chip and seal. So it's actually a layer of tar, layer of stone, layer of tar, layer of stone. So you actually get to build a pretty significant surface that will make positive changes, a lot more so than doing a single chip and seal. Also, we included a fog seal with this. So after the chip and seal is complete, the contractor will fog seal it, meaning they'll apply an emulsifier that'll turn it black. So it'll look like asphalt when they're done. There'll be a few, they'll do everything and they'll roll it. They'll have to come back a week later and sweep it. So the process itself is going to be a little bit different than the mill and fill process. And we have to take into account a number of things. And that is, if the road is improved or unimproved or not, if there's curbs, sidewalks, the stormwater system. One of the biggest things to consider is the grade of the driveways and whether homes sit below or above the street. So we don't want to change the flow of stormwater or anything in any of these areas because you're not milling anything off and putting it back. So when we're looking at all these streets, there's a number of variables that we looked at, but I think the process, talking with GPD and looking at extending our dollars, really trying to push it out, that I think this process is going to be maybe a good positive change moving forward for some alternative methods of resurfacing. I do, this is kind of going to be our pilot year. I know we've done it, years in the past, 10, 15 years ago, but even the technology is somewhat the same, but the methods has improved. We talked to Cleveland Heights. Cleveland Heights does a double chip seal program like this. Their infrastructure, their community, as far as the layout of the city and stuff, is pretty similar to Barberton. So, after talking to them, we were pretty comfortable at kind of revisiting this technology to use in the city of Barberton.
Thank you. Thanks for the
Yep.
explanation.
Mr. Tracy, what do we expect? I know you said that it's an updated method, or the method's the same, some of the technology has changed. Have we looked at what this, I'm in favor of chip and seal, but have we looked at how this will affect like motorcyclists with loose gravel? Is that going to be something that we're going to have to just kind of let our residents know about? Or is this, with that fog, fogging supposed to eliminate a lot of that loose gravel?
So, of course, there's going to be loose gravel with the chip and seal program, but it gets rolled immediately after it's applied to the tar, and then they come back and sweep up the loose gravel, which typically is going to follow the crown of the road and go off to the edges. There is a risk there, but it's really up to the responsibility of the motorist to realize that a road has been chip sealed and that there's gravel there. And they're all on residential roads with, speed limit is 25 or less.
All right. Is there any other questions from the body or committee? Seeing no other, Mrs. Miller?
A year or so ago, we might have had an issue with a driver on a freshly paved or newly paved portion of a road. But when those roads are being constructed, it's the contractor's responsibility to post that it's under construction and that those things are, not quite ready to be driven on properly and all of those things. And so once they perform the duties under the contract that we require and it's finished, according to what Mr. Tracy just said, and they release it, it is ready to be driven on both by motorists, either in cars or on motorcycles. And they are giving their opinion that it is safe to be traversed on. So that's not our opinion or Mr. Tracy's opinion. That's the contractor's opinion that it's safe to be traveled on. So that's not our issue. That's the contractor's issue.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bell. Is there any other questions, comments? Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Chair. This one's for Director Doherty. I had sent you an email about a sign possibly or on Snyder Avenue eastbound towards the Van Buren intersection there. Is that possible, or is it possible to even just get it restriped or with arrows and the straight? Because there's a lot of times people are lately have been hugging that double yellow line and suddenly cutting over to go straight.
Mr. Heidick, 1 second. Well, just hold that thought. I'm gonna make a motion. Do I have a motion to call for this piece of legislation? Motion made by Mrs. Angeloff and seconded by Mrs. Fry. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Motion carries.
You're
Yeah. Motion carries. All right. Now miscellaneous discussion. Mr. Heidick, you may continue. Thank
I
you.
apologize,
No,
Chairman.
no worries.
Mr. Heidick,
Yes, Director.
Mr. Yes, I have not yet spoken with the street superintendent, Dan Martin, about that. But I can get back to you as soon as I do.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Mr. Heidick, you said that sign was on Snyder Avenue.
No, Chairman, currently there is no sign on Snyder eastbound going towards the Van Buren intersection. What's happening is a lot of cars that aren't familiar with it are hugging the double yellow line, which ends up being turn left only instead of straight. When they realize it, they overcompensate and basically cut some cars off if they believe that first car is going to turn left.
Yep. Okay. I know what you're talking about. All right. Thank you for the clarification. Miscellaneous discussion. I actually have one thing, and this is just really something. Mr. Tracy, I reached out to you about the sidewalk program this year, and I just wanted just to reiterate. I've had a lot of feedback about the sidewalks, and a lot of residents and a lot of businesses looking at firing that program back up, the sidewalk program that we had, and you explained it pretty well. I just wanted to say that on the record that we're looking at it hopefully this year. Correct? Is that was to have funds for it this year?
Yeah, there was $40,000, I believe, when in the budget that was passed for the sidewalks program. I believe. I don't know if the mayor can confirm that or not with me, but I'm fairly certain.
Yeah. So just I just had a lot of inquiries, and I know last year, I think it was the beginning of last year, the mayor sat down with Mrs. Angeloff and myself regarding some sidewalks in our areas, and I think it's time that I'd like to revisit that because it coincidentally or have it some of the residents and businesses were actually in that area that we discussed. So I was just inquiring about a sidewalk program. So hopefully that moves forward this year. Is there any other miscellaneous discussions for streets, sidewalk, and lighting from the committee or from the body? Mrs. DeBevick?
Just real quick to piggyback on your sidewalk topic is I also thought there was money in the CDBG budget.
Yeah, I do remember seeing.
Is that different than the 40,000 that is
I believe
budgeted?
so. I think there's actually a standalone sidewalk.
Yes, Councilman Greer.
Yes, Mayor.
Yes, it's Fund 237. It's a separate fund for sidewalk replacement. It was put together several years ago. It's different than fixing other sidewalks. So it's a way to help residents with a split. So there's $40,000 budgeted in that. And then what you and I spoke with Councilwoman Angeloff about was adding new sidewalks to sections of 5th Street Northeast where there lacks sidewalks. And then there's also sidewalk money in the CDBG budget that has to be used in LMI areas. So several kind of pots of money, somewhat used for different reasons, but the same goal of replacing sidewalks.
Now the sidewalk improvement program is for, this is just for clarification. Fund 237 is for fixing sidewalks, and that's like a match program that we have. Is that correct?
It's for sidewalks that are deemed dangerous by the city.
Okay.
Those take precedent over someone who just wants to do it.
All right.
And I believe we have a running list on that.
Yeah, I think Mr. Tracy was saying that you guys were keeping tabs on that list while we during the pandemic. Is there any other questions from the committee or body? Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn? Motion made by Mrs. Fry, and seconded by Mrs. Angeloff. And we are adjourned at 6:41 p.m. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Okay, next committee is the Environmental Health and Social Services with Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. Environmental Health and Social Services, meeting May 17th, 2021 at 6:42, virtual. All members present. Other council members also noted. We have no new requests for legislation. I'll open this up for miscellaneous discussion. First thing we can, Mr. Mayor, if you can speak about the June 2nd, the new rules and laws and all the stuff about the masks, if you don't mind, sir.
Do you want me to cover that now, or would you like at the end of council?
Whatever either for you, sir. We can wait to the end of the meeting.
Okay.
That's fine. Thank you. Open this up for miscellaneous discussion. Committee. Other council members? All right. Hearing none, motion to adjourn, please.
I'll make that motion.
All right, Mr. Heidick. Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, Mr. Griffin. And we are adjourned at 6:43. And with that, Mr. President, I pass. Thank you.
Thank you. Next committee is Planning, Annexation, and Code. Mrs. Angeloff.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to call to order the Planning, Annexation, and Codes meeting. Today is May 17th. It is 6:43 p.m. We're meeting virtually by GoToMeeting. All members are present. All council members are present and other guests as noted on my sheet. Topics of discussion. We have no legislation request at this time. Miscellaneous discussion. I will open that up to the committee first for any type of miscellaneous discussion.
I have nothing.
I have none.
Anything from the body? Nothing? All right. I do have two announcements. Tomorrow, Tuesday, the Board of Zone. I'm sorry.
Councilor
Somebody
Jaber.
had something, Mr.
Sorry.
Jaber?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Seeing that in my ward up there, they want to rezone the 4 parcels. And I talked to Mr. Trevor Hunt. I think it's a brilliant idea. And I support Mr. Trevor Hunt 1,000%. And I'd like to follow his lead and doing a good job with the rezoning of some of those pieces of city property in Barberton. I think it'd be a big move to go to. It's 1,000%. Thank you, Trevor Hunt.
You're muted, Chairwoman.
Mr. Jaber, you're talking about on Norton Avenue?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. That's what I wanted to say. The Board of Zoning Appeals, we do have a meeting tomorrow at 5:30 at the Active Adult Center, and Planning Commission will be Wednesday at 5:30 in council chambers, and that is on the agenda.
And just an update, the BZA for tomorrow has actually been rescheduled for Tuesday, June 1st.
Oh, really? Okay, thank you.
Yes. Yep.
June 1st. Same time?
Same time.
All right. Give me a day off. I had 4 meetings last week. All right. Anything else from
One other comment related to the CDBG annual action plan. We got notice on Friday that there was a calculation error from the federal government. So good news is that we'll be receiving about $10,000 more on our budget. So we will, more details to come here, but we'll have to follow their guidelines on how to move that forward. So, so I can share more when we get into the Rules Committee next week, as I do a little bit more research there.
Well, that's good news, more money. So it wasn't an error, a miscalculation on our part. It was through HUD, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Nice. Anything else?
Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Heidig?
Thank you, Chair. Is there a reason we're looking at changing the zoning from C to I2 in the former Shamrock properties?
That will be discussed Wednesday at the Planning Commission,
Thank you.
okay? Anything else? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you,
I'll
Mr.
second.
Medges. And Mr. Medges first, second is Joyce Coburn, and we are adjourned at 6:47 PM. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Finance Personnel, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is Monday, May 17th, 2021. It is 6:47 PM. We are meeting virtually on GoToMeeting. All members of the Finance and Personnel Committee are present, as well as all council members and guests as noted on my agenda sheet. We have quite a few items to discuss this evening. The first is a requested legislation that was referred to finance from utilities. This involves a letter from Caroline Crawford, Stormwater Manager, requesting legislation to appropriate $1,104,135 from the unappropriated item of the FEMA fund to the stormwater capital budget of the FEMA fund for expenses related to the 15th Street Northwest Hazard Mitigation Grant Program and will be reimbursed. Emergency wording and one reading has been requested. Does anybody have any comments or questions regarding this piece of legislation? I can't see up everyone's hands, so if you do have a question, please just ask to be recognized and you can speak.
Mrs. Fry,
Yes, Mrs. DeBevick.
thank you. It's not really, it's just a comment. I just want to clarify that I believe a legislation like this particular piece is not an emergency, or it shouldn't go one reading, but I will defer that to the rest of the committee.
Mrs. Fry,
Yes, Mrs. Coburn.
I spoke with Caroline through email, and the request is because this is a very fast moving, although it's slow. We've been doing this for 3 years, and she has just a certain amount of time, which may seem like a long time, but it really isn't a long time for her to interact and take care of all the processing. This is grant funding. It is not, we applied for it 3 years ago, and this is the end part of this program. And she has a lot of paperwork that has to be done, and she needs access to the funding to do it.
Thank you, Mrs. Coburn. Anybody else have any more comments about this piece of legislation? Okay,
Caroline,
hearing none.
Can
I'm sorry.
I make a comment?
Yes,
great.
surely. Sure.
So just to kind of jump back to last week a little bit, someone had asked if there was like a deadline to pass it, and the answer is no, there's not. It just takes, if we were to go 3 readings, it would take 6 weeks away and then have to do the 30 days for the non-emergency wording. So, it just delays the process. So Caroline's already been in touch with the residents on 15th Street, and they're anxious to get it going, and she is too, as well as myself. So, it's not something that, by law or there's no date we have to have it done by, but it's in our best interest to move it forward as quickly as possible, so that we can get started. The first thing we need to do is hold a meeting with all the residents, explain to them the appraisal process. Then the appraiser has 45 days to do the appraisal. And then after all those appraisals are done, they have to get reviewed by the state appraiser, which in this last round took anywhere from like 4 to 6 months. They were going back and forth with these appraisals between our appraiser and the state appraiser to finally reach an agreement of what the appraisal would be. So it's just things, they do move fast, but certain properties, they tend to lag. So that's the reason we put emergency wording on it, is just to try to get it started as quickly as we could, since we got the okay from FEMA to move forward with the grant funding. So.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy. Chairwoman, I'd also just like to follow that up with one more question then. So when did we get notification from FEMA that we could move forward?
I'd have to look back at when our meeting was, but as soon as we did the implementation meeting, which I'm going out on a limb, it may have been March, middle end of March, but I don't know that. I'd have to pull it up because we have to review the implementation packet. And once we do that, we can move forward with it. But she's also working on the 14th Street project right now, which we're in a real active part of it, trying to find people, places to live, and trying to work out all the URA agreements with individuals, and working on the appraisals, and the county coming out with their appraisals, kind of put a spin on things for us, where we had to kind of work around a couple of things. So there's it's been very busy. So that's I can't off the top of my head think of the actual date we did the implementation packet with Ohio EMA.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy. Are there any other questions or comments? Hearing none, do I have a motion to call for this piece of legislation? Mrs. Angeloff? Motion made by Mrs. Angeloff. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mr. Medges. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, that passes unanimously unless I misheard somebody. This next piece of legislation on our agenda for this evening is also referred from utilities, and is also a letter from Caroline Crawford, Stormwater Manager, requesting legislation to appropriate $41,773 from the unappropriated item of the FEMA fund to the stormwater capital budget of the FEMA fund for expenses related to the Arthur Street Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, and will be reimbursed. Emergency wording and one reading is also requested on this piece of legislation. Do I have any questions? Yes.
That is 141,000.
Oh, on my sheet it says
Yeah,
41,000.
it was a misprint last week, but it is.
Okay, and it carried over to this week. Okay, all right, thank you. So $141,773. I stand corrected. Thank you, Joyce. Are there any questions or comments about this piece of legislation? Okay, hearing none, do I have a motion to call for this? Mrs. Angeloff made a first motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Craig. Mr. Medges seconded that. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, thank you. The third item on our agenda for this evening is a letter from Greg Tracy requesting payment to Everbridge Incorporated for the annual Nixle contract in the amount of $5,400.91. This piece of legislation was voted out of committee last week, but I was asked to find out if we paid a flat rate or if we were charged per text. So I did get in touch with with Chief Morber, as Mrs. Miller had suggested. Thank you for that suggestion, because he had all the information. And he got back to me saying that he even gave me the history that the Barberton Police Department had started to use Nixle for missing kids, Alzheimer's patients, emergency road closures, etc. And at that time, the Barberton Police Department paid for the entire bill. After we showed the value of our department, the others got on board and the city IT department paid for it. When the other joint dispatch agencies saw how we were using it and the value, they joined in and agreed to pay their part of it. It's good, easy, and effective way to notify folks. So that is the explanation about Nixle. And this particular piece of legislation has come to us because of the fact that it is an invoice in excess of $3,000 and it is dated prior to the purchase order. And that's the only reason it has come to council. So we need to pay this invoice and need the approval of council. Therefore, does anybody have any other questions regarding this piece of legislation or the invoice or Nixle?
Mrs. Fry?
Yes,
So it is a flat rate then, and that's our city's portion, or is that just?
yes, yes.
Okay, I missed
Yes.
that. I apologize.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
It isn't per text, it's a flat rate.
And
And
we collaborate with the other communities at
at dispatch, and they
Okay.
pay a portion and we pay a portion.
gotcha.
So that's
Thank you.
this was our portion.
Thank you.
So, thank you. Thank you. Does anyone else have any comments or questions? Hearing none, do I have a motion to call for this? All right, motion made by Mrs. Angeloff, and I need a second. Second by you.
I'll second it.
Mrs. I think Mrs. DeBevick did. Did you, Carla?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Seconded by Mrs. DeBevick. All in favor signify by saying aye.
I
Aye. That passes unanimously. And when Chief Morber sent the information about Nixle, he also informed me that Lieutenant Brian Jameson will be retiring after 33 years of being at the Barberton Police Department. And they are going to have a send off, and all of you should receive a flyer in your mailbox. And you can get tickets from Jackie McCarthy in the police department. The next piece of legislation on the agenda for this evening is a letter from Councilman Thomas Heidick regarding a request to amend ordinance number 103-2017, compensation for elected officials. And I have gotten information about what other communities pay, council pay is, and their populations. And I know that if a council person does not make at least $12,000 per year, if they were to make a career in the OPERS pension system, that the years that they made under $12,000, they would not, those years would not be counted towards their retirement health care. Mr. Heidick's proposal is to reduce the president of council's pay from $15,000 down to, I have so many papers, hang on a second, down to 13, and to also reduce council at large, the position council at large, their pay scale from the current $12,000 down to $10,000. This doesn't affect the other members of council. But does anyone have any comments or questions regarding this?
Mrs. Fry.
Please speak up if you have, oh, Mrs. Angeloff?
Yes, I'll address this to Mr. Heidig. What is the reasoning behind this? What is your motive?
This represents a 20% reduction in the salaries of council people. And obviously, we can only do 2 positions plus the president. And this year, by charter rules, the city has been in a bind. And when I look towards the risk and reward factor, the positions of council really carry no consequences per se, other than answering to the voters. If we were to pass something that was deemed unconstitutional or against something, it's simply struck down and we suffer no shortcomings from it. Unlike, let's say, the law department or finance department, it could suffer grave penalties from the state or lawsuit, or even the mayor's office, which could suffer grave consequences for the entire city if there's missteps. If the council passes something past certain deadlines, then sometimes that doesn't even carry any consequences. So in the model of 12 elected officials, the risk reward does deem that we would be lower on the poll than, say, those 3 positions. In 2019, before I was on the council, and the original proposal for the 6 wards, law director, finance director, and mayor called for certain amounts that would have worked for the mayor, law, and finance directors at the expense of council, which I did provide everybody with, even though I wasn't on council, with a sheet breaking that down. I just believe that the risk versus reward does not place that burden on us, and that is why I propose a 20% reduction. Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions or comments about
Mrs. Fry,
this? Yes, Mrs. DeBevick.
when, just as Mr. Heidick indicated, in 2019, when we discussed pay, I was chair of finance, and I also did what you just said you did, which was pull area communities like Barberton to get an idea of what the positions are being paid. You said that you did that. Can you share
Yes.
that with us?
Yes, like, and I have the populations to go with it. If in Akron, a council person makes 35,000, the council president makes 45,000. They have a population of 565,000. Norton makes 7,500. Their president makes the same because they elect their president from their body. They have a population of 12,018 people. Cuyahoga Falls makes $20,325, and their council president makes $21,680. They have a population of 49,106 people. The city of Greene just got an 89% increase in what their council people make. They have a population of 25,760 people, and they do have an annual increase of 3% on council wages. In Akron, in their legislation, the salaries for the members of council shall be adjusted at the same percentage rate as the lowest percentage rate adjustment provided to the employees of any of the city's bargaining units, provided, however, that salaries for members of council shall not increase on a calendar year basis any than private industry workers receive, as measured by the U.S. Department of Labor Statistics. And then it lists laws associated with that. But I have legislation all the way back to 1999, which is now 22 years. And at that particular time, this piece of legislation only covered, hang on a minute, This only covered the president of council and members of council. And at that particular time, which was 1999, the president of council made $14,731. Then in 2002 got a raise to 15,000. In 2006 got a raise to 16,000, and in 2010 got a raise to 16,500. Council made $11,785.54. In 02 it went to 12,000. In 06 it went to 12,500. In 2010 it went to 13,000. Every other community is going forward and we're going backwards. And since elected officials have to set their own pay, we're not the only ones that will be on the next piece of legislation. And I don't know if it's a good idea for us. I mean, we're staying at $12,000, which is basically the same amount of money we were making in 2002. And as long as we would have money to give the other elected officials in administration a raise, I think that would be a better way to go. But of course, Mr. Heidick is a council at large person. I mean, he has the position of council at large and he's the one proposing it. But I would like to point out also that if we would pass this when it comes up in 2 years for us to vote for the raises for the other elected officials and ourselves, the other regular council, the ward council people, they might not go along with reducing their pay. So you're setting the stage for yourself for the next 4 years and the president for the next 4 years. And in the case of council at large, you are jeopardizing having health care, retirement health care, if in fact you would continue on in an OPERS position. And I don't care how anybody votes or how anybody feels about it. I am just stating facts surrounding this particular piece of legislation, and anybody can vote however they want. I just wanted people to be aware of the possible negative things that could come from this piece of legislation. So does anyone have any of their own comments about this? Mrs. Angeloff?
Yes, I have to say basically the same thing Mrs. Fry said. I think in 2 years, when you're looking at council, ward council people, if they don't want that reduced to 10,000, they want to keep it at 12,000. With having the other elected officials on with the ward, I think it's very detrimental because we want to give the elected officials, the finance, law, and the mayor a raise. But what if it's split? Half a council doesn't want the 10,000; they want to stay at 12,000. Then that jeopardizes the other elected officials, and I think that's that can cause a problem. And I'm not. I don't know, Mr. Heidick, if you think Solidarity that they're going to go along because at large reduce theirs, that the council people are going to go ahead and reduce theirs too. I just think it's very risky. And I would feel much better if all of council, and it can't be done, I understand, was on one and the other elected officials were on the other. I just wouldn't bet that council people would, if you're assuming that they at large reduce theirs, then the council wards are going to reduce theirs. I'm not too sure about that. That just kind of bothers me a little bit because we have other elected officials on there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Angeloff. Anyone else?
If I
Yes,
may-
Mr. Heidick?
Question.
Yes.
Thank you. Just to address the point that when you say it sets the stage for my position there, I will remind the council that the last time this was done was 2017, obviously by the charter there. And at the time, Counselor DeBevick was an at-large and Counselor Michael Soares were at-large, and they both abstained. So as would I for any vote in this matter. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Okay, Mr. Medges?
Okay, you were reading off some of those other cities, but you
Yes.
didn't tell us what the city of Green gets. You said they're getting an increase,
Oh, I'm sorry. I will give it to you. I
and they
have it
are
right
very
here.
close to our population.
Right. They make $15,102. And that is an 89% increase from their former pay, which I don't have here. But they are also going to receive an annual increase of 3% each year.
Okay, thank
top
you. You know, comparing our pay to other cities, we're really below already. I don't understand this pay cut at all.
And we've had the same pay for years and years, 22.
Well, we dropped it in 2008. We dropped $500. I know we did that, and that was it. We've never increased anything after that.
Mrs.
So
Fry.
that's 13 years.
Is that Mrs. DeBevick or Mrs. Coburn? Who's
No, it was
speaking?
Doherty. Justin has
Oh,
his.
hi, Doherty. Okay,
Go
thank
with
you.
Justin first, and then I have a comment I'd like to make.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. 1 second.
I'm sorry.
1, 2, 3 divided by 30. Oh, there's a whole bunch of math involved. Anyways, thanks, Chair. How was legislation enacted for pay raises in the past? Because some of the statements should apply for pay raises too as well. Was everybody, was it staggered the same way for when we requested a pay raise, but now since it's a reduction, we're worried about council not going along with it? Or
It was handled in the same way.
Okay.
It was, we did the elected official pay right before the mayoral race. And there weren't any changes. They didn't get raises. And this is how it's always handled. I'm not saying in other cities, but that's how it's handled here. Maybe that's state law that all cities are like that. But I guess that in their legislation, they would have to have notification that they would get, percentage raises going forward. Their legislation did not look, Akron's I'm talking about, did not look like the elected official pay that we normally enact before 120 days before an election, which Mr. Heidick had pointed out, and that's why he had submitted it as early as he did.
And just for clarification, if this did take place for at-large and the president with the pay reduction, the rest of council would follow suit, or would theoretically would follow suit in 2023, the beginning of 2023. Is that how that would work?
It would before the next election, so I would think, yeah, 2023.
Thank you, Chair.
So there would be, and it would not only be ward council people, it would also be the law director, the finance director, and the mayor would be on the same piece of legislation.
Thank you.
Mrs. Fry.
Yes.
I would just like to give a little bit of history for those that weren't here. I had introduced legislation to overhaul the pay scale for non-bargaining employees. I believe that was in 2017 that it was voted on. And the structure was based on, without overtime, the percentage of pay that a subordinate would make relative to his supervisor. So we found many positions that were within 85%, which is the definition of you're in a pay compression. So and at that time, the mayor, the law director, and the finance director were not up for the 120 days before an election type of legislation. But that was the second piece of the wage scale for the city employees that are non-bargaining were to be the elected officials. So we wanted to put the elected officials above the highest paid employee in the city. Now, it's been 8 out of almost, not quite, 10 or 12 years, I'd have to look, where the law director, the mayor, and the finance director did not get a raise. 8 out of 12 years. That's quite a bit. That's 3/4. So I think that that's wrong. And I think that it would be, just my opinion, of course, precedent setting to vote a reduction in wages for the other elected officials, because it would be precedent setting and it would be detrimental to those elected officials at the highest positions within the city of Barberton. It's not my prediction. It's just my opinion that it would be more comfortable perhaps for council to follow suit rather than thinking globally within the structure and the pay structure of the entire city. That's my opinion. I just wanted to voice that and give a little bit of history of how this went. So currently, the law director, the finance director, and the mayor make much less than the highest paid employees. And that's, you know, the vote for those 3 elected positions, they didn't receive any increases for that 4-year term. And again, that would have been 8 out of 12 of the past 12 years. I don't know if that makes sense to you guys or not, but I think it is
makes
not
perfect sense, and I agree with you. I agree with you that you're setting precedent, and thank you for your comments. And Mrs. Angela? you had your
Yes,
hand up.
Mr. Greer had mentioned that the 2023 ordinance that has the council wards and has the other 3 elected officials, if we would follow suit. Not necessarily. We don't know what it's going to be in 2023. Definitely we don't know how council's going to vote on their own pay. So that's another thing that I think is really detrimental. If you're looking at solidarity because the at-large reduced theirs to 10,000, you don't know what council people are going to vote on. You don't know if they're going to vote for the, reduce it to 10,000 or stay at 12,000. I think that's kind of premature saying that, that we would follow suit. Primarily, what we really have to do is look at the mayor, the law director, and the finance director, and that should be number 1. Like I said, we haven't had raises in years and years and years, and council's last rate, they reduced theirs in 2008 to 12,000. I don't know. It's a good, I think, Mr. Heidick, if you're looking at it as a good gesture that it's not a lot of savings, but it is a decrease. I wouldn't bet that the rest of council in 2023 would agree with the 10,000. They might, but I don't know. So that's my opinion on that. I don't want to, I think that ordinance in 2023 is very important to the other elected officials. And that's the point that I'm going to try to get across. It's not so much with the council people, it is for the other elected officials. Thank you.
Mrs. Fry, Mrs. Miller has her hand up.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I can't see. Mrs. Miller?
Yeah, so you were talking about how other cities and their ordinances are different than ours. So council can certainly adopt ordinances to pay their elected officials in a manner differently than we do now. So other cities adopt ordinances that say elected officials are paid, their increases are based on the average increase of the average of all of the employees in the city. And then you don't set the pay constantly. That's a choice council makes, and you can choose to do that. You have to do it in a manner that takes place before people take their term. That's a choice you can make. You don't have to keep doing it the way you're doing it now. So you can do the research and develop new ordinances and enact them. That's a choice that you make. You don't have to continue to do it the way you're doing it now. Number two,
Thank you.
the next pay ordinance that that would come up, the one that contains the ward council and mine and Jeremy's and the mayor's. You don't have to, you could treat the mayor, finance director, and law director differently than you treat the ward councils. You don't have to do them all the same. So the idea that if you reduce the ward council, you automatically have to reduce the other elected officials is not a correct assumption. You could certainly carve out ward council from the other elected officials. And as a personal note, I find it very interesting that all of a sudden everyone's concerned about how the wages of elected officials are compared to comparable communities, because that was never a concern of anybody 3 years ago.
I would like to say that I did look into elected official pay when we were working on that, and we did have a vote on ideas that different members of the committee had brought forward. And I thought that I had brought forward a pretty good plan for trying to equal the playing field. However, I am just bringing this up because I think that's an important thing to know what other communities make. And I think it's an important thing that, you know, rather than as our elected officials have been stuck in the same pay scale for years and years, council has gone back and forth, but basically it's been $12,000 for 20 years, 22 years. And I don't have an issue if he wants to send this through. I was just trying to bring up the issues that could come up because of it. And I'm not trying to put the law director, the finance director, and the mayor into the same pot as us. And if we could somehow change that up, the cycle that we're on, maybe we should think about that. And also, when you said that the legislation could be crafted differently, maybe when we do the mayor, the finance director, and the law director, it should be crafted so that they get percentage raises going forward rather than just staying stagnant and staying at the same wages. Does anyone else have any other questions or comments?
Mrs. Fry.
Okay.
Mrs. Fry.
I'm sorry.
Ends up.
Mrs. Fry, I just have a
Yes.
statement, and I don't mean any disrespect by this at all. This is just my point of view in this. I've never joined council for the paycheck. I've never joined council for the OPERS. I know it means a lot to some. I don't think if we're worried about pay as a council person, I don't know if this is the right job, because it's more community based. And again, I'm not saying anything negative about anybody, but this is just, I support this. I do, as long as the money taken from us goes to the full-time jobs of the law director, of the mayor, and of the finance director. That's just my personal thing. I do stand behind this 20% reduction.
That's fine. And therefore, if nobody else has any more comments, do I have a motion to call for it?
I'll make a motion that we call for it.
Okay, motion made by Mrs. Bebevic.
I'll second that.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. The next piece of legislation is a draft pending.
Wait. Did you take a vote on that?
Yes, I did.
Okay, you didn't ask for nays.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I usually don't get them. Are there any nays?
I vote nay.
You're voting nay?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry, Craig. It very rarely happens. The next piece of legislation we have is a draft ordinance. It's actually a pending piece of legislation. It is resolution number 45-2021, and the title is the PRO Act support. And this is a resolution in support. The PRO Act support, a resolution of the Council of the City of Barberton in support of protecting the right to organize, PRO Act, which provides a generational opportunity for the labor movement and serves as the cornerstone of the AFL-CIO's Workers First agenda. This has already gone through a first reading. Therefore, this needs to be amended and also voted on. And the amendment is as follows. This is resolution number 4-2021. And in the fourth whereas on this piece of legislation, it should read, whereas through the expansion of collective bargaining under the PRO Act, there may, that's one of the changes, be increases in pay and will be protections for women, people of color, immigrants, and the LGBTQ community in areas where our non-discrimination laws are still falling short. Does anyone have any questions about the changes or the amendments or the legislation in general? And please remember, I cannot see everyone. So if you do have a comment, please just ask to speak. Okay. Hearing none, do I have a motion to call for the amended? Are you motioning? Okay, the amended version. Motion made by Mrs. Angeloff. And do I have a second?
I'll second it, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mrs. DeBevick. Seconded by Mrs. DeBevick. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. And that passes. All right, and now we come to miscellaneous discussion. And I could make some comments about the American Rescue Plan. But first, I wanted to announce that one of the businesses in my ward, the 6th Ward, with Leach's Meats and Sweets, celebrated their 50th anniversary over the weekend. They had a tent set up and they were serving food. They had entertainment, and they had over 350 people attend. And I think even Chief Morber was there, and Dave Polachek and a few others. I was out of town, so I was unable to go, but it was very successful. In regard to the American Rescue Plan, they finally had their long-awaited second meeting of the American Rescue Plan Committee. And I was unable to attend that as well. However, I did get notes, and the meeting was actually just more or less an overview of the guidelines that were issued by the Department of Treasury. And the committee will be attending webinars and trying to get more information on the spending. There was a brief synopsis of the input from council members that had sent emails, as well as some citizens who had sent ideas for the rescue plan. And that is basically all that was discussed. And I think more information will be coming in the coming weeks when it is more defined about what we can actually spend the money on after they have evaluated the guidelines. I really don't know anything other than that. Does anyone have any questions that perhaps somebody else could answer, the mayor or, yes?
Mrs. Fry, I just have actually just a question for you. Is there any way you have the ability to scan the notes and share them with city council from the meeting?
It's just basically an agenda and what I read for you, but
Okay.
yes, I mean, it's nothing, there's nothing concrete. But if you want a copy, I can send you one, but we do not have anything concrete.
Okay, I was under the impression that there were notes. I was under
Under the impression that what?
I was also under the impression that when we discussed this several weeks ago, myself and several other council members asked if we could have minutes from the meetings.
I don't think that there are actual minutes from the first meeting. Mayor Judge, are you here? Can you answer that question about the minutes?
Yeah, I mean, we don't take verbatim minutes. A lot of dialogue happens. And so, there's no one there transcribing that. It's my understanding that we don't have to take official minutes. Again, we're not making motions or anything like that. Just a lot of dialogue on our interpretation of what our projects are in that needs list versus what the guidelines say. And a lot of great discussion, but what's important to note is that it doesn't matter how any of us interpret it. It's really up to the U.S. Treasury and the state, the auditors, and everyone else involved that interprets it. So we want to make sure that we have a game plan moving forward. So it's just been a lot of dialogue, but not verbatim notes taken.
Thank you. I guess I'm still just concerned or bothered by why all city council can't be invited to the meeting. Even if we aren't allowed to speak, I think it's at the end of the day, we're the ones that are going to be voting on the information. I would like, I'm once again requesting that if we can't have minutes, if we don't have any opportunity to know what was discussed, then I would like to be able to attend.
Well, we want to be cognizant of everyone's schedule, and it'd be a nightmare to try to schedule a meeting with all parties. Like Councilwoman Fry said, the agenda, we have no problem sending out anything, but we don't take verbatim notes on the discussion of the items. So council's had, continues to have opportunity to supply input and ideas and things, questions and things of that nature.
I just wanted to add that to date, I have only heard from 3 council people. They are Councilman Greer. He sent in about a 2-page summary of what he would like to see it spent on. Mr. Heidick inquired about the dam, and we discussed that during one of our meetings here. And actually, we're going forward with the dam without the American Rescue Plan money. And then Mrs. Angeloff submitted some ideas about just items that would help with the image of Barberton in the respect of painting buildings, curbs, doing striping, reclaiming the property on Van Buren, working on our retention ponds, welcome signs coming into the city. Then even, and I don't know where these came from, but people in the general public have made suggestions about, and one of them was to renovate the South Van Buren corridor, buy out of the flood zones, which is what we're doing with the 14th and 15th Street projects with the FEMA money. And road improvements, we don't know if we can do that. A new jail, which is something that's been on the table, but I don't know if that is something that we can do, use the money for. But right now, that's all it is a bunch of ideas. And as I said, I beg your pardon?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I apologize.
That's okay.
I understand that. I didn't say that I wanted to provide ideas. I have some thoughts. I just want to hear how it can be used, what ideas are being discussed. I just want to be in the loop. I don't know how much clearer I can make that. I just want to be in the loop. Other council members, how do you all feel about this? Am I being unreasonable? Am I?
No, not at all, Mrs. Stabevic. I too think would like to see notes of meetings or running lists. I understand that there's no notes per se from the first one, but if council can provide, maybe give other council members the ability, if they can, attend the meetings too as well as future just taking notes and providing all of council with a list of ideas, maybe a working copy or something, just to keep us in the loop.
I could send you the list of the things that I do have myself that I have received in regard to input.
Chairwoman, if I may.
Miller has her hand up.
Yeah,
Who?
just
Miller.
Lisa, Carol, it's me. Just to be clear, the mayor did inquire, and minutes are not required to be taken at this meeting. So, certainly if Mrs. Fry wants to create a report and report back to council, that as the liaison to council, that would be up to her. But the mayor did inquire, and I certainly responded to him, but minutes are not required at this meeting. There's no decisions being made at this meeting, as it was explained to me. My understanding from the mayor was that he had created this committee to get input, and but that no decisions were made. Of course, council is the decision-making body, so minutes are not kept. Mrs. Fry can certainly bring reports back to council, and that would be up to her and the body to require that of her. Now, whether who goes to the meetings is not a legal question, but as to the issue of minutes, that was a legal question, and he did inquire, and I answered him.
Thank you,
I
Mrs.
can
Miller.
send
And I will say that I am more than happy to report. And actually, I thought that's what I was doing just now, was reporting what happened at the last meeting. I told you the information that I have received as a councilwoman, and I received those in my email. And we have all talked about, and that has not changed, the 4 main areas that this money can be used. And just, this is my own thought about this. I think that this particular infrastructure package is more geared towards the things that we suffered as a city, as a nation, regarding income, regarding health, regarding businesses. And in this infrastructure package, they are really invested in water and sewer, clean drinking water, things of that nature. And another big piece is the broadband infrastructure, which would help due to the fact that schools were closed and kids had to do their studies at home. So I think this is geared towards trying to make some of the things that didn't go right better for the future in the event that we do have things of this nature happen. It's not like, from what I have seen, and I'm no expert and I have not seen the guidelines at all. I think it's over 300 pages. But from what I have seen of what they will allow, it appears that it is more related to COVID than painting things and making things look better and building buildings and things like that. And I think the mayor was speaking, and if he wants to follow up on that, please do.
Well, yeah, I just want to remind council that, this committee is focused on the American Rescue Plan, but at some point, Congress and the Senate will receive the infrastructure bill and start discussing that. I'm not sure how quickly that will move through the process. But that is something else we're cognizant of. There's also an biannual infrastructure capital bill through the State House. So we're trying to, all these funding sources and the ones we have currently, trying to play this kind of chess game of projects and what bucket does it get paid out of, and can we leverage money from other sources, and is allowable. And then we've got kind of a short time frame. So yeah, we have no problem passing along the agenda, the notes, whatever is taken. And I want to be cognizant also of all the other rules that we have to follow, sunshine law, things of that nature. So there's a lot to be considered when putting together a meeting like this.
Chairwoman, if I may.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Heidick.
Thank you. After these weekly meetings there, I would like to see a itemized list of anything discussed. That way, not only can we not double up on ideas, but we could also build upon any ideas that are in there. I think just a weekly email, that way we have a hard copy to see what's already been discussed, would be very beneficial to the council. Thank you.
Would you rather have that than a report so that we don't discuss it during meetings? Would you rather have me just send out an email, and then if you have anything that you want to discuss, we could do it during our regular council meeting? Is that how you would like to have it handled?
Well, I think both are very important. I think, when it's out in the public like this, but, that gives us time after that meeting to digest what was spoken of, to basically, like I said, not double up on an idea. I want broadband, Councilor Greer wants broadband, but, we don't have a list in front of us saying it was already been discussed, then we're kind of spinning our own wheels here. But again, that could be something we could see, build on, and discuss. So I think they're both very beneficial. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm just going to interject this, and this is just my own thought. Any committee that has too many people in it doesn't get anything done. And this committee is made up of mostly people throughout the community that are in organizations that benefit the city and have their own ideas about how they're going to, move the city forward. Therefore, I think that it would be best if, like Mr. Heidick just communicated, that we wait until we at least have a list before we delve into everybody's opinion about what we should do. And as I said, that's just my personal feeling. The committees that we have on council are made up of basically just 3 people. And then it opens up for the rest of council to make their comments about how we're going to go forward. And that's probably how this committee should be handled as well. But as I said, that's just my personal opinion. And I really don't have much input. My role is to represent council. And who had another question? Mr. Jaber?
Thank you. You guys are doing an excellent job with forwarding us information. How are you guys meeting? Through GoToMeeting, through phone calls, or how you guys are meeting right now?
In person.
In person.
In person? Okay. So there's no live webcam, no GoToMeeting, nothing like that at all, huh?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Now, I understand what Mrs. Devevic's saying, and out of respect, I think everybody on council, she's got a lot of experience with the finances and being the chair of finance for so many years. So all her facts has always been there. And I think if she'd get more information, we can follow her lead also. Just so she can listen, not to interrupt you guys or come in between you guys. It's just some people listen better when they're there, or instead of reading a paper or emails. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jaber. Any other comments?
Chairwoman, I have a question for, this is
Sure.
For Mr. Flaker.
Okay. Go ahead.
I just want to make sure he was there. Mr. Flaker, a couple of things. Mrs. Fry said that this was an infrastructure package. This is not the infrastructure package, correct?
Correct. This is the American Rescue Plan. the only time it talks about infrastructure really is about the water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure.
Which is one of the 4 objectives.
Right.
Correct. The 4
And then-
categories.
Okay, and then my second question is, it's kind of a statement / question. I thought last week when you gave us an overview, you mentioned that it could be used to pay safety forces, wages, and roll-up costs. Is this true? Or did I hear that wrong?
No, the key word is could. It's not 100% certain though right now, because they did add, reading into it a little more, they did add a little bit of wording after who would be fully dedicated, and the wording kind of almost makes it a little bit more restrictive than CARES Act. So gonna have to see how that plays out, because in this one, I don't have the exact wording in front of me, but it does mention something about those public safety, health, and all that. They have to be to a certain unit, assigned to a certain unit. So it's the exact wording. I just pulled it up. And I'm paraphrasing it. The employee or his or her operating unit or division is primarily dedicated to responding to the COVID-19 public health emergency. So it almost kind of makes it a little more restrictive, but going to have to see, because I think there will be a little bit of a tweak to guidance on this, and I just find it hard to believe that they add that line to it and make it a little less restrictive than CARES Act. So going to have to see how that one plays out.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Flaker. I just want to make a statement based off of Mr. Flaker's answer. If this money could indeed be used for those wages, that would free up general fund money to do possibly some things that Mrs. Angeloff suggested, like improving the appearance and some things that are in disrepair within the city, where they wouldn't be subjected to the rigorous rules of the American Rescue Plan. And so for that reason, that's why so just from my perspective, the reason that I wanted to sit and listen to the guidelines is I wanted to understand them so that I can then think about things. So Mrs. Fry, I absolutely respect you giving us, there was an overview of guidelines, but that statement doesn't help me understand what the overview was. So
Well,
that's where I'm coming from when I ask if there are minutes or if there's some way to listen virtually, or if because unfortunately that's how my brain works. So that's all I was asking for. And that's
Well, I'd like to remind council that these are interim rules, that the final guidance has not been issued yet. So kind of everyone is doing what we're doing, trying to ascertain the best use of these funds. So, we'll provide the agenda and notes as taken, and but we've gotten very few input from city council on ideas. And if you need ideas to help generate additional ideas, I get that, and we'll pass those along if we haven't already. But again, the final guidance has not been issued yet.
And I just want to make something clear. I did not an infrastructure package. Infrastructure was mentioned by the mayor, saying that it's going to be followed by an infrastructure package. I mentioned that it can be used for water and sewer and broadband, which are infrastructure projects. However, this is not an infrastructure bill. I had said that I think that it is geared towards the things that went wrong during COVID. And it's geared towards health and making drinking water safe and getting schools set up so that they can conduct classes without having to have students attend the schools. As far as me saying that they went over the guidelines, I was not at the meeting, which I said at the beginning. So I didn't even hear any of the guidelines. I do not have a copy of the guidelines, and I will be there next week. But anyway, I just wanted to clear that up, and there is, like Mr. Flaker pointed out, there are a lot of ifs, ands, or buts, and the committee will be attending webinars, and then as a group, we can maybe determine which direction we can go and see how everybody understands the guidelines, because people interpret things differently. And at this point, the best thing that council could do would be to send some suggestions about what their ideas are about what can be done. And you don't even have to know whether or not it can be used for that. It would just be a way of getting ideas out there, and the more, the better, so that we can go in some direction and use as much of the money as possible. In regard to wages, that would be great to free up money, but then that creates another issue, because then you have the money in the general fund, and then some of the other contractual workers might think that they should get a raise, or that the money could be used for something for them, their department, or what have you. So we have to be very careful about how we distribute the money, about what projects we choose to use the money for. And it's going to take time. I hope not too much time, because the faster that we can start getting projects lined up and do something with this 16 million, the better it will be for everybody. Does anybody else? Yes.
I'm sorry, just one last comment. When you talk about the webinars that we're trying to attend, just so council knows, these webinars are put on by organizations at the state or federal level, or the lobbyist, or what have you. And the vast majority of the time that I've encountered, you have to register with them, or you have to be invited. And so you just can't share the link. You just can't let anyone on it, because they won't, that's their rules. So I just want council to know that we're trying to work through all these webinars and different points, but some of them we can't share because the link won't work. So they've got that all set up, and so I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Mayor. If there are no more comments, Mr. Griffin.
I just got one question for you, Mrs. Fry. We still don't know 100% what we can use the money for. Am I correct?
I think Bill should answer that.
Correct.
Okay, so we got a lot of ideas, and it's basically going to be COVID related. So
that's my personal opinion, that it's COVID related, because
right,
the wages are for COVID. The water
right,
has something to do with COVID. The schools have something to do with COVID. Businesses have something to do with COVID. It's a rescue plan, because
that's
we
what I say.
just
I don't think they're going to
pandemic.
come back and just give you money to fix something that wasn't caused by COVID. I mean, just that's just my opinion.
It would not be able. There are a lot of projects that we cannot, use it for.
Yes.
And you don't want to use it for the wrong thing and then have to pay back the money. So,
okay.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin.
Thank you.
Okay. As I said, if anyone else, last chance, we're going to adjourn here in a minute. Okay. Hearing nothing, seeing no hands, hearing no voices. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Did I hear some? Yes.
Yeah, this is Chief Bursley. Since we're in personnel, I just wanted everybody, if you weren't aware, Mary Ann Struckle, the administrative assistant's mom, passed away over the weekend. If we could keep her and her family in our thoughts and prayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Bursley. And have a moment of silence. Okay. On that sad note, does anyone have any other comments or questions? If not, do I have a motion to adjourn? Motion made by Mrs. Angeloff. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. DeBevick. Seconded by Carla DeBevick, and we are adjourned at 7:56 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Fry. Okay, we'll just go right into our committee of the whole meeting. Today is Monday, May 17th, 2021. This is Barberton City Council Committee of the Whole meeting. I call this meeting to order at 7:56. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, please call the roll.
You're muted, Laura.
My buttons disappeared. Okay, Mrs. DeBevick.
Here.
Mr. Heidick,
Here.
Mr. Greer,
Present.
Mrs. Angeloff,
Here.
Mr. Griffin,
Here.
Mr. Jaber.
Here.
Are you caller 4?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Mrs. Coburn
Here.
and Mrs. Fry.
Here.
Mr. Medges. Okay.
Citizens addressing council.
We have none.
Okay, we'll go right into our committee reports. First off is Mrs. Angeloff with planning, annexations, and codes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Planning and Annexation and Codes met this evening at 6:43. We met virtually on GoToMeeting. All members were present, all council members were present, and others as noted on my sheet. Topics of discussion, legislation request, we have none at this time. Miscellaneous discussion, the committee had no questions. I opened it up to the council, and Mr. Hunt informed us that there was a calculation on the CDBG funds, that we actually are getting $10,000 more. Mr. Jaber welcomed the rezoning on Norton Avenue, and Mr. Heidick wanted to know why Norton Avenue is being rezoned. Those questions I won't have answered until Wednesday when we have the Planning Commission and see how they vote. The Board of Zoning was rescheduled until Tuesday, June 1st at 5:30, and the Planning Commission will be meeting at council chambers on Wednesday at 5:30. And with that, I pass.
Thank you very much. Next up is streets, sidewalks, and lighting. Mr. Greer.
Thank you, Mr. President. Street, Sidewalk, and Lighting met today, May 17th, 2021. I have 6:12 p.m. here and virtual. All members of the committee were present, and council and guests noted on my sheet. We had 3 pieces, topics of discussion, requests for legislation. The first request for legislation was a letter from Greg Tracy, our service director, requesting legislation permitting the mayor to apply for federal resurfacing funds program by AMATS to improve Norton Avenue and First Street, and requested emergency wording. The conversation started off with Mr. Tracy explaining this that AMAT has a round of funding another round of funding due to projects coming under budget. So they're trying to expend that money when they open it up for cities to apply. The funds that the city of Barberton will be paying will be coming out of the permissive and some out of the street capital. The project for Norton Avenue is Barberton is expected to pay around $126,000 for their 20% match, and approximately $96,000 for the first street. Norton Avenue is going to be. This project is to repave Norton Avenue from Barber Road to the west to the city limits, and 4th Street to Norton Avenue to Westlake. President, Mr. Metches, you asked that you thought that the Norton Avenue was going to be completed with the other project. And in fact, part of it is this year, and this will actually complete Norton Avenue here in the city of Barberton. And if this goes through and everything goes to plan, it'll be taking place 2022. Mr. Bevick asked how the unexpected funds would affect our current budget that we laid out and where we were getting some of our money. Mr. Tracy explained that some things may need to be delayed, but they're really, and we would have the ability possibly to roll into 2022, so we should be good to pay this out of some of our funds, and some things may need to be delayed, but nothing to worry about. That's was motioned and passed, and we'll be moving to council. The second piece of legislation is a letter from Greg Tracy, our service director, requesting legislation to enter into contract with Parent Asphalt and Concrete for the paving of the 2021 road program. They were the lowest and or best bidder. They happen to be the lowest bidder, and was done through an open bid, a public bidding process, and it was a sealed bid, and GPD recommended them as well. I don't have any notes for discussion, but I do recall talking about the dashboard that Mr. Tracy provided, which was awesome. It showed Parent Asphalt as the lowest bidder and all the other construction companies that applied for this bid. Motion passed, so that will be coming to council as well. Third piece of legislation was a letter from Greg Tracy, our service director, requesting legislation to enter into contract with Specialized Construction Incorporated for the chip and seal portion of the 2021 road resurfacing program. And this falls in line with the Parent Asphalt Company. This is for our 2021 road program, and it was a public bid, and it was a sealed bid as well, and is also recommended to use these guys through GPD group recommended them. Mr. Bevick asked what is chip and seal, and Mr. Tracy provided the details on that. Mrs. Miller provided clarification on just one of the questions that I asked, and it was basically about the loose gravel on the roads. Mrs. Miller just clarified that the conditions of the roads are deemed drivable by the contractor and not by the city. The motion was made and passed, so that will be coming to council. Miscellaneous discussion. I brought up about the sidewalk program, and I would like to see that be in place, and shared some information between Mr. Tracy and myself on that program. Mrs. DeBevick asked about the funds for CDBG as well as the city funds, so there was a little bit of talk around the funds we had available and how they could be used. Mr. Heidick provided some feedback about Snyder Avenue East and no sign causing confusion to the motorists in the turn lane, last minute turn lane. And I also would like to mention that the previous two pieces of legislation, Parent Construction or Parent Asphalt and Concrete, and the Specialized Construction Incorporated for the chip and seal portion of the 2021 road program, was requested emergency wording, and we'll go one reading for timeliness. And with that, street, sidewalk, and lighting adjourned at 6:41 p.m. With that, I pass.
Thank you very much. Next up is city utilities with Mrs. Colburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. City utilities met on May 10th. All members were present and all others as noted. We brought forth 9 pieces of legislation. The first 2 were pertaining to the purchase of a truck. We had a letter from Greg Tracy requesting the legislation to enter into contract with Henderson Products Incorporated in the amount of $41,604 for the purchase, manufacturing, and installation of the body package for the truck. The second piece of legislation was from a letter from Mr. Tracy requesting necessary legislation to enter into a contract with his son Kenworth of Richfield in the amount of $73,686 for the purchase of the new 2022 Kenworth T270 dump truck cab and chassis. This truck will replace a truck that will be moved into the city streets department. The third piece of legislation was a letter from Mr. Tracy for a resolution request for cooperative agreement for infrastructure improvement between the County of Summit and the City of Barberton, authorizing the mayor to enter into a joint application between County of Summit and City of Barberton to apply for the Ohio Public Works Commission OPWC State Capital Improvements Program. This is a grant, and we are requesting emergency wording on this. The BCD. Our next piece of legislation was a resolution request for a cooperative agreement for infrastructure improvement between the City of Norton and the City of Barberton, authorizing the mayor to enter into a joint application between the County of Summit and the City of Barberton to apply. I think that should have said the City of Norton and the City of Barberton, for us to apply for a Public Works Commission State Capital Improvements Program grant. And this also has emergency wording. Our next piece of legislation was a letter from Dennis Weaver, Interim Utilities Director, requesting a resolution OPWC grant application for the Wolf Creek Dam Rehabilitation Project. A request to authorize a draft resolution authorizing the mayor to prepare and submit a funding application to participate in the Ohio Public Works Commission State Capital Improvement Program and to execute contracts as required for the Wolf Creek Dam Rehabilitation Program with emergency wording. And for this, we had to do the first 2 before we could approach the third. Yeah, one B. There's lots of papers. The next was a letter from Mr. Weaver, Interim Director, requesting a resolution for a grant application, Taylor Road Water Main Replacement Project. A request to authorize a draft resolution authorizing the mayor to prepare and submit a funding application to participate in the Ohio Public Works Commission State Capital Improvement Program and to execute contracts as required for the Taylor Road Water Main Replacement Project with emergency wording. Our next request was a letter from Caroline Crawford, Stormwater Management, ordinance request to purchase of 114 14th Street Northwest, an ordinance authorizing the purchase under the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program in the amount of $57,000 with emergency wording due to the closing date on this house. Our next piece of legislation was also a letter from Caroline Crawford, Stormwater Management, requesting legislation to appropriate $1,104,135 from the unappropriated item of the FEMA fund to the stormwater capital budget of the FEMA fund for expenses related to the 15th Street Northwest Hazard Mitigation Grant Program and will be reimbursed. Emergency wording and one reading is requested due to the process needing to move forward. This was referred to finance. We have a second letter, or third letter from Caroline Crawford for Stormwater Management, requesting legislation to appropriate $141,773 from the unappropriated item of the FEMA fund to the stormwater capital budget of the FEMA fund for expenses related to the Arthur Street Hazard Mitigation Grant Program and will be reimbursed. Emergency wording and one reading requested, and this also was referred to finance. Our miscellaneous discussion there was none, and with that, I pass.
Thank you, Mrs. Coburn. Next up is Public Welfare and Safety with Mrs. DeBevick. Mrs. DeBevick, are you there? All right, we'll skip over her and we'll come back to her. We'll go to Rules, Marketing, and Development, Mr. Coburn. Mr. Shorter Griffin, excuse me.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. President. Rules, Marketing, and Development met on May 10th. We all met virtual. We had no requests for legislation. We have one pending legislation, ordinance number 43-2021, CDBG Annual Action Plan. The first reading was on May 10th. We didn't have any remarks or matters of discussion. A motion was made for us to adjourn, and with that, I pass her.
Thank you very much. Next up is Environmental Health and Social Services, Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. Environmental Health and Social Services met May 7th, 2021, virtual at 6:42. All members present. The council members also present noted. We had no new request for legislation, and we had no miscellaneous discussion, and we adjourned at 6:43. And with that, sir, I pass.
Thank you. Next up is City Properties, Parks and Recreation with Mr. Heidig.
Thank you, Mr. President. City Properties, Parks and Recreation met Monday, May 10th, 2021, 6 p.m. All virtual, all guests noted. We had no new requests for legislation. For our miscellaneous discussion, the doors are going to get timers in the park restrooms and keypads. The splash pads at Edgewood are down. The parts and the pad need repaired. We have 2 quotes. To just fix it would be about $20,000, and to just overhaul it would be about $60,000. We have been having some problem with some swans that we're taking care of there, and we adjourned at 6:04. With that, I pass.
Thank you. We'll go to Finance and Personnel, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Finance and Personnel came to order tonight at 6:47, Monday, May 17th, 2021. We met virtually. All members of the committee were present, as well as all other council people as noted, and guests as noted on my agenda sheet. We had several pieces of legislation tonight. The first was referred from utilities. It was a letter from Caroline Crawford, Stormwater Manager, requesting legislation to appropriate $1,104,135 from the unappropriated item of the FEMA fund to the Stormwater capital budget of the FEMA fund for expenses related to the 15th Street Northwest Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, and will be reimbursed. Carolyn, asked for emergency wording and one reading. Joyce spoke to Caroline regarding the one reading, and Mr. Tracy gave us the input on why we needed the one reading. There is actually no deadline. However, when you go 3 readings, it would take 6 weeks plus another 30 days after the legislation is signed. And this particular appropriation is to get the program started on 15th Street Northwest regarding the flooding. It is the same type of program that was held on 14th Street, and it's a lot of paperwork involved, and they have to hold multiple meetings with the residents of 15th, explain the appraisal process, and ultimately reach an agreement on selling their homes, but that comes at the end of the program. Caroline is also currently working on wrapping up the 14th Street project, so she has much to do, and it would just make it easier for everyone if we go ahead with this and just have one reading and pass it. The next piece of legislation was also referred from utilities. It is a letter from Caroline Crawford, Stormwater Manager, requesting legislation to appropriate $141,773 from the unappropriated item of the FEMA fund to the Stormwater capital budget of the FEMA fund for expenses related to the Arthur Street Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, and will be reimbursed. This piece of legislation also they also requested emergency wording for this piece of legislation with one reading. Both of these first 2 pieces of legislation passed unanimously. The third piece of legislation was a letter from Greg Tracy requesting payment to Everbridge Incorporated for the annual Nixle contract in the amount of $5,400.91. This piece of legislation was voted out of committee last week. However, an explanation was asked for regarding the fees, whether they were a flat rate, or whether they were charged to us per text. On the recommendation of Mrs. Miller, our law director, I contacted the chief of police, Mr. Morber, and he explained that this particular program had started out in the Barberton Police Department, and it was basically to find lost children, Alzheimer's patients, and things of that nature. And when it worked so well, it was suggested to dispatch that possibly we all get on board with the other communities that are in our joint dispatch center. And they are on board. They all have the Nixle, and each community pays their portion of the bill, the Nixle bill. And I was going to say something else. Hold on. This particular piece of legislation was needed because the invoice was over $3,000, and it came before the purchase order was prepared. The next piece of legislation was a letter from Councilman Thomas Heidick requesting to amend ordinance number 103-2017, compensation for elected officials. We had lots of discussion regarding this. Mr. Heidig is asking that we craft legislation to reduce the amount of salary for the council at large positions, which we have 2 council at large, from 12,000 down to 10,000. This particular piece of legislation must be turned into the Board of Elections 120 days prior to the upcoming election so that salaries are set before new people are elected to different positions. The piece of legislation also asks for the salary for the council president to be reduced from 15,000 to 13,000. We got it out of committee with 1 opposing vote, and that will be voted on at a later time. We also, the next piece of legislation was a draft pending legislation. This is a piece of legislation that we had last week. However, we needed to make some amendments to the language that is in the legislation. It is resolution number 45-2021. It is titled ProAct Support, a resolution of the Council of the City of Barberton in support of protecting the right to organize. ProAct, which provides a generational opportunity for the labor movement and serves as the cornerstone of the AFL-CIO's Workers' First Agenda. This has already gone through its first reading, therefore I had to read the amendments that were going to be made. They were, I can't find my piece of legislation. They were all in the 4 whereas of the piece of legislation of the resolution. And we changed the word will to may regarding increases to pay. And we also emphasized that women's rights, LGBTQ rights, and other minorities would be covered in this ProAct legislation. This also passed unanimously. We had miscellaneous discussion. I announced that Leach's Meats and Sweets celebrated their 50th anniversary this weekend. They had over 350 people attend. They had food and entertainment, and it was a very nice affair. I also touched on the American Rescue Plan Committee meeting, which I did not attend, but which I received information about, and I relayed that information to the committee. I told about the suggestions that I have received, and I've only received them from Councilman Greer, Councilman Angeloff, and Councilman Heidig, and there were 3 other citizens that sent in suggestions. Council asked that since we don't have to actually have minutes taken at the meeting, that I send an email to council after the committee, after the ARP committee meetings, and let them know how things are going forward. Chief Persley informed us that the secretary for the fire department, Marianne Struckle, lost her mother this evening. There was no other discussion, and a motion was made to adjourn, and we adjourned at 7:56 p.m. And with that, I pass.
Thank you. Okay, Mrs. DeBevick with Public Welfare and Safety.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sorry about the technical difficulty. The Public Welfare and Safety Committee met last Monday, May 10th, 2021 at 6:05 virtually via GoToMeeting. We had 1 request for legislation, which was referred to Finance, and it is a letter from Chief Rob Persley requesting to appropriate $3,500 from the general fund to the fire department's operating budget. The $1,000 of this money was a donation received from Woodman Life Chapter 232 to be used toward firefighter PPE. And the Barberton Fire Department also received a $2,500 safety intervention grant for firefighters' exposure to environmental grant from the Bureau of Workers' Compensation. Chief Persley indicated that the money has been earmarked for particulate hoods. And that was referred to finance. We had a couple of pieces of legislation that we talked about last week, but they were voted on. So those have passed. And our miscellaneous discussion was that there is a recall on some Kitty brand smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors. So if you're unsure, you may want to look that up and just be safe. And with that, public welfare and safety will pass.
Thank you. Mayor's report.
Thank you, Mr. President. So in terms of COVID, we've seen a lot of changes over the last few days. So HR sent out a great email update last week. Within hours, Governor DeWine, made some, based on Governor DeWine's changes, having June 2nd the date where the mandates and restrictions would be lifted. After the email was sent out, the CDC then came out and made some statements about if you're fully vaccinated, there's no need to wear a mask daily. They did. On the governor's orders, it's still June 2nd. Now, those orders have not been placed on paper that I'm aware of. I had a phone call this morning, a conference call, and as of this morning, they were not put on paper. So they kind of like the American Rescue Plan guidelines, they're not finalized. So these orders are not finalized until they're on paper. That may have happened since this morning, but not that I'm aware of. They were due out today. So with the CDC statements, how do you know who's vaccinated and who isn't? So they're going on the honor system. So a lot of people are still kind of worried about that. So it kind of boils down to, take care of yourself, use common sense, carry your mask, even if you're fully vaccinated. If you don't feel comfortable where you're at, put on your mask. We can't predict who will get COVID, and if you've already had it, even though you may be fully vaccinated, you could still get it, or how that individual's body is going to react to COVID. Some people had more severe symptoms versus mild symptoms. So, but we do know that right now, kids under 12 cannot be vaccinated. So that kind of leaves a large age range throughout the country that are not being vaccinated right now. There are some exemptions for the mandates, the mask and the social distancing. That includes schools, jails/prisons, any public transportation, and healthcare facilities. So a lot of changes over just a few hours. When it comes to kind of our operation, and I've been working with President Medges on this about council meeting again in person. We checked, Laura checked today, all the communities are doing something a little different. Some are meeting in person already, some are meeting a hybrid method, some have set a date in June to meet in person or do a hybrid method. And I believe Councilman or President Medges had mentioned a few weeks ago that his date, target date was early June. And we've been talking about that. So city operations were a little unique versus other communities where we have city operations, a jail, police department, and a court system all in one building. So we can still require masks here in the city building. So we can still do different than what the other communities are. So it really comes down to how much business do we have going on in this building. And Typically on a busy day, we have about 100 employees daily in this building and about 100 visitors during normal operations. So, we want to take that into consideration. The state, the county, and the city remain at a state of emergency. So that has not been lifted, but those items are kind of being discussed right now. We are working with Barberton Suma Hospital on a pop-up clinic, hopefully this week. So I'll get information out as soon as I can, but been trading communication with Barberton Suma all day. So we will be posting an update on COVID and some additional information and kind of more common questions on our social media. And this was released from Summit County Health Department and in conjunction with the County Executive Eileen Shapiro. So a lot of questions out there based on the governor's remarks, CDC coming out, and then the governor coming out again. So this is kind of a never-changing thing that we're dealing with. So in talking to President Medges, we are ensuring, IT is ensuring that we could do a hybrid method. So if some council members, when we do meet in person, if they want to meet in person and others want to stay virtual, that we can do that. So we want to make sure there's no glitches in that system. We are set up to either everyone meets virtually or everyone meets in person. We just want to make sure that a hybrid method, if it comes to that, that we're prepared. So a lot of information there. Let me check here. When it comes to these grant programs, there may not be a hard and fast deadline, but I know that the granting organization, whether it's AMATS or FEMA or OPWC or anything like that, they want to make sure that their money's being used. So if there's not a hard and fast deadline, emergency wording or first passage reading is still imperative because these granting organizations want to see that their money's being used. So that's an important consideration. In terms of the American Rescue Plan, before anyone jumps on social media and starts blasting me or the city, just remember that, this is a team effort. And, I think I'm one of the few mayors that I'm aware of that has put a committee together, and your input is definitely appreciated and valued, and I'm looking for more of it. I wish, it'd be great in a perfect world where we could all sit down and discuss these things, but we don't have clear guidance right now. And so we want to make sure that we get as much input as possible and that we have clear guidance on the usage and that we, no stone is overturned and that we have a clear, concise plan, workable plan moving forward. So, I'm anticipating a lot more input from City Council and would appreciate it. And, like I said, your opinions and ideas are definitely valued and appreciated. We're working for the betterment of the community here. And the goal has always been to look back 10 years from now and say, yeah, we made the right decision. We don't know what's going to come out of the infrastructure bill that's being put together. We don't know what other funding mechanisms may lie ahead in the near future. All we know is what we have in front of us right now. So I appreciate your continued support and your continued ideas and thoughts as we move forward. And we'll get the agenda out to you. We'll get you any notes that are taken. But right now it's discussionary. And so, we don't have the staff to take verbatim notes, but we can get you those as many notes as possible that we do take. So no problem there. We're all here to work together. So, Mr. President, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, any remarks from the body? Okay. All right, a couple things as the mayor talked about going live. We'd like to shoot for the first week in June. It's all up to you know, being able to stream it and have people stay at home if they want to and have people in council. Another thing we're concerned about is how many visitors can we have in there? The chamber is not very big and we can't have too many people in there. We can't get too relaxed. So we're working on that. And one other thing, this is the third time I've asked about turning in your committee meeting minutes. Okay, the reason we have to turn these in, okay, this is to be state compliance with the record retention policy, okay? You know, they could come in and audit us, and if we do not have those in, we could be, you know, I don't know what the penalty would be, but I don't want to know. I want you guys to turn these things in. You know, this is part of your job, to turn these in. All you have to do is put them in Lori's mailbox. Okay, even if they're blank, they need to be turned in. So we have documented proof that we had these, okay? So please turn those in and turn your back ones in too, because most people are not turning these in, and I don't understand why. Like I said, this is part of your job, and so let's help Laura out and turn those in. And that's all I have. So anybody else, just last minute, speak up if you want.
I have something to add. This is Don.
Okay, go for it, Mr. Patterson.
Just want to give you to the
Can't understand you, sir.
You're breaking up. Mr. Patterson, we lost you totally. All right, we'll give him a second here. Obviously, there's problems.
Mr. Medges?
Yes?
I just wanted to say that the quilt for the Parks Department for the Mum Fest is hanging in the window at Coburn's Quilting until they come and pick it up. It's completed. It's beautiful.
Okay. Well, you might as well leave it there. Everybody can see it. Okay, Mr. Patterson, did you ever make it through?
Yeah, I'm back in.
Okay, go
you all
for
hear
it.
me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. One of our arm got broke. We surgery in the rod in his arm. So I don't know. We were told by the vet to get the other one out before the other swans killed that one. So we took it out. We're gonna take our back out here, store it over and come up with a game plan. But heads up, if you don't see the swans out there, that's the reason.
Okay, we'll be looking for him. So, all right, without anything, any other person wanting to speak anything? Okay, I call this meeting adjourned at 8:40. Thank you, everybody. Turn those minutes in.